So I just got done watching a very pretentious, smug, and condescending video by famous YouTube celery Contrapoints about how we must fall in line like good little proles and throw our favor behind one warmongering sociopathic demented pedophile over another warmongering sociopathic demented pedophile because reasons. And I must say, this sort of behavior is begetting from Contra given her status as a petite bourgeois left liberal of the Bernie Sanders type.
I was a Bernie supporter.
So it falls perfectly within her class interest to default to the Democrats. After all, they have long abandoned their working class base and have nothing to offer to anybody outside of the petite bourgeois mid-income liberals, the likes of which Contrapoints here belongs to the ranks of. The reason why I am here today, however, is to deconstruct this intellectually bankrupt video that is very much substandard compared to Contra's earlier works. This whole video, from start to finish, just feels like a cynical, bad-faith ploy to manufacture consent for the Democratic Party.
The oppressive policing, the unrest in the streets, the rising tide of fascism.
Give me a break. Your good friend Joe Biden is on record for saying that he will increase funding to the police and expands the police state, which is completely unsurprising given the fact that he not only has Kamala Harris, a cop, as his running mate, but also the fact that he is one of the architects of our modern police and criminal justice infrastructure, being behind much of the tough-on-crime legislation of the 1980s and 1990s. And as for the point on fascism, liberals and progressives need to cut it with the hyperbole. Fascists don't take power democratically. They are usually installed by the ruling class or take power in a coup. One can no more vote out fascism than one can vote in socialism. And at this current moment, we aren't at a meaningful risk of a fascist takeover anytime soon, since neoliberalism as an economic model has mostly fulfilled the goals of fascism far more efficiently by means of inverted totalitarianism, manufacturing consent, and capitalist realism. I mean, come on. You think the Boogaloo Boys or the Proud Boys really have their shit together anywhere near on the scale of, say, the brown shirts of old? The closest thing we have ever had to an American brown shirt movement was the Ku Klux Klan at its peak in the 1950s, and even at their peak they were a paltry force by scale. And in recent times, fascism as a historical phenomenon, despite the conditions for its rise largely not being present, has been used as a boogeyman and scare word by liberals to get you to vote blue. And regardless of their intentions, good or bad, liberals don't realize that the goals of the fascist regimes of old, that is to say, the consolidation of wealth and power into the hands of a minority of wealthy oligarchs, the destruction of unions and workers' movements abroad, the deregulations of tax cuts, effectively redistributing wealth from the bottom to the top, the broad, expansive police state and surveillance state, the supremacy of one nationality or in-group over another, have all been achieved rather efficiently under the neoliberal world order.
The criminal negligence of a president who's refused to admit the danger of a disease that has killed 200,000 people and counting?
To think the Democrats' response to COVID would have been that much better than the Republicans is great man thinking. They are just as much on the payroll of Wall Street as the Republicans. Remember, it was a Democrat, Bill Clinton, whom repealed Glass-Steagall with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which basically undid FDR-era regulations on Wall Street, making the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008 as well as the current COVID-19 crisis possible. And like the Democrats, it was just as much within the material interests of the Republican Party at the time to hide the fact that COVID was here. Also, keep in mind, due to the lack of public sector infrastructure and ease of transportation in this country, a proper response would have been virtually impossible anyways because from the bottom up, our political and economic institutions are tailored almost exclusively to maximizing profits for the billionaire oligarchs that lord over us. Moving on.
Because even though Biden is not my boy, I still think that dethroning Trump by electing Biden is the single most important thing any American can do right now. Twitter has already seen the title of this video, and I'm sure they're firing off hot takes as we speak. Typical T-thought normie Radlib endorses the electoral farce. Is this your leftist queen of YouTube? Looks more like a rich Karen who'd rather complain about cancel culture than revolt against the neoliberal status quo. Tabby-chan, Tabby-chan. You know what, Tabitha? For once, I'm actually gonna take the bait. So this will be a conversation with the communist Twitter cat girl that lives in my brain. I'm making this video because my timeline is full of leftist 22-year-olds who are so disillusioned with the system that they intend not to vote in this election.
I do want to point out the smug tone of this video, as though people who are Bernie or bust, or support third party, are just childish, infantile, pie in the sky, etc., and that to be a Biden supporter is to be realistic, pragmatic, etc. Let me tell you guys what's really childish, though. Acting like it's a failing of the individual if somebody like Trump takes power, when it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if a political party fails to support its constituency or represent their interests, then its constituency isn't obligated to turn out. You'd think that the Bolivian elections, where a socialist party won in the face of a undemocratic fascist coup, should be a testimony to these libs that it is possible to organize outside of the context of bourgeois politics. And funnily enough, I myself am not against the harm reduction voting strategy. If Contra and the rest of Radlib YouTube were out here telling you something along the lines of, yes, things are looking bad now, but we have to hold our nose and vote blue just this one time. But in the time being, we should focus on building up a third party over the next 4 to 8 years. That way we won't be in a situation where we are always voting for the lesser evil in the first place. Then fine, that's a reasonable position. But that's not what these people are saying. They're sitting here acting like we have some sort of moral obligation to support the Democrats after they have demonstrated massive amounts of contempt for working class politics time and time again. So here's a newsflash for Radlibs. The way that you protect yourself from an aggressive, oppressive state apparatus is not to choose which individuals within that aggressive, oppressive state apparatus are the ones oppressing and repressing you. It is to organize outside the context of that state, which means erecting the pillars of dual power and a working class party. So this is my thesis. Fuck the Democrats. They are complicit in the rise in the far right with their constant snubbing of left-wing politics and pandering to the phantom moderates for support. And the sooner that you people get around to realizing this, and get around to building a third party and dual power institutions, the closer we get to actually changing things.
Give me your worst. I want free healthcare, student debt canceled, and worker ownership of the means of production. Biden won't give us any of that, and I don't want to vote for someone who won't actually change things. More than I want to retile my bathroom. But sometimes the situation gets so toxic and so dangerous, well, you have no choice but to get your hands dirty. And in this election, I consider a vote for Biden primarily a vote against Trump. You know, voting for a politician is not necessarily the same as supporting the politician. I don't think anyone should stand Joe Biden. I'm not asking you to like, comment, and subscribe to Joe Biden's OnlyFans. Fascinating, though I'm sure it is.
The president has a big stick.
To me, voting is more of a utilitarian calculation based on the likely consequences of each candidate winning. It's not hero worship, it's not choosing a person to have a beer with, it's...
After the repeated rat-fucking that transpired on both elections and Biden's fucking abysmal running mate, as well as the Democrats repeatedly snubbing progressive policy, people have every right to be angry and not want to support the Democrats anymore, let alone vote. Because if they're just going to cheat out the compromise candidate every single time, and that compromise candidate will never call it out or attempt to challenge the powerful in the ways that they say that they will, then we have no obligation to support that party whatsoever. And as for this harm reduction strategy, it doesn't work in the long term because the Democrats have no incentive to try and appeal to us because they know that we will always fall in line and that they will always have our support because lesser evilism. As I've stated before, lesser evil voting is the politics of a coward. Rather than try and fight the system and do harm abolition, you would rather stay complicit in it and do harm reduction because it's the easy way out. The Republicans are crypto-fascists and the Democrats are fascist collaborators. They enable the Republican Party at every turn and then browbeat us with the good cop, bad cop routine every election cycle because, well, if you don't vote for us, then you have to put up with our bullshit, but worse. People have been trying this harm reduction strategy for decades, and trying to infiltrate the Democrats over and over again to try and pull it left, and it hasn't worked. We need a new strategy, we need dual power, we need a workers' party, and this capitulation to the Democrats has got to stop.
Filling the Supreme Court with anti-abortion fanatics, withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, appointing climate change deniers to head climate research, attempting to remove medical non-discrimination protections for trans people, constantly maligning the integrity of elections with no evidence, declaring the press the enemy of the people, calling white nationalist militias very fine people and telling them to stand by, aspiring to be an autocratic dictator and disdaining democracy itself, trivializing a deadly pandemic in the name of delusional
Okay, so let's break this down. First off, as I've said in the past, fuck the Supreme Court. We need a revolution. The whole system from the bottom up is rotten to the core and has demonstrated time and time again that it is fundamentally incapable of reform on its own. And second, the Paris Climate Agreement wasn't anything special, it was just a formal agreement between countries to scale back carbon emissions. There is nothing legally binding to it. And to ask the fossil fuel industry to scale back their activities is to ask a meth junkie to scale back his meth smoking. And on to point 3. You do realize that oil production exploded under Barack Obama, and Joe Biden won't ban fracking or do away with fossil fuel subsidies, right? The administration's being packed full of the very same people that they are meant to regulate against is not unique to Trump. The revolving door between business and government is a well-known fact, and if you deny this, then I have a bridge to sell you. As for the next point on trans issues, while the Democrats tend to be more in the times on issues like this, it doesn't ultimately matter in the end if the system itself is still intact. Otherwise, I'm sure those brown people in the Middle East can rest easy knowing that it's actually a trans queer drone pilot delivering hellfire from above upon their village, and not a straight white drone pilot doing it. I'm sure the indigenous people down in Latin America will be delighted to hear that it was in fact not a man, but a woman who orchestrated the coup that overthrew their democratically elected governments and installed a dictator who privatized everything, drove down wages, destroyed all the unions, and sold out the domestic populace to foreign capital. Point 5, 6, and 7 pretty much amount to vote Biden because Trump is a meanie head. Yes, orange man bad, moving on. As for point 8, see my point earlier. Again, you can no more vote out fascism than you can vote in socialism. If it was within the interests of the bourgeoisie to install a dictator, then they would do it. Otherwise, it is within their interests to uphold this veneer of democracy in effort to legitimize the regime in the eyes of the Republic, making them think that they have a say in the electoral process when they in fact don't. If Trump attempts a coup d'etat, and he is not ousted by the military on the spot, then the veneer falls, and the legitimacy of the system is put into question. And finally, point 9, again, for a number of reasons, a proper lockdown is not possible due to the simple fact that the United States political and economic infrastructure is fundamentally incapable with coping with a pandemic like this. We have no national healthcare system, no pandemic response system, no rigid checkpoints for transportation. We didn't even have testing kits ready until months after the pandemic was underway, and for economic reasons, we couldn't do a proper response if we wanted to. If we shut down industry, people lose jobs. If we put limits on social interaction, that strangulates the circulation of commodities. And while there's something to say about Trump's uniquely abysmal response, you would be a fool to think the Democrats wouldn't have botched it either. Again, stop blaming the man for what is otherwise a systematic problem.
Voting doesn't take that long. At most, it takes 1 day. You can vote and do other things.
Drug dealing doesn't take that long. It doesn't take all day. I can put down whatever I'm doing right now in my leisure time and go peddle crack to a nearby impoverished community to some children. Just because something is easy doesn't make it the right thing to do.
Interests do not align with mine. Why should I listen to what you say? Oh, you shouldn't. I don't know why anyone listens to me, honestly. But also, I am a degenerate class traitor, and in my opinion, influencers should be the first against the wall. Honestly, I just wish you'd guillotine me quickly and get it over with. You at least have—
A class traitor is somebody who takes their millions and riches and wires it to revolutionary communist movements to help them overthrow their respective governments in the third world. What a class traitor is not is somebody who is trying to manufacture consent for a bourgeois party against the interests of the working class. Curb your LARPing, Contra.
Vote. Do I participate in the charade of a farcical election? America is not democratic. It's a rigged, two-party corporatocracy. Well, I mean, yeah, there is a lot wrong with our elections. Big money financing campaigns, the Electoral College, gerrymandering, voter suppression, DC being disenfranchised. All of this should obviously be changed, but I don't think that in this moment, leftists boycotting the election is an effective form of protest. Okay, but voting is for liberal normies who use Facebook and Reddit. Ew. Okay, yeah, it's true that voting is not cool. It's boring, it's incrementalist, it doesn't make you feel like you're owning the libs or being edgier than your parents. But you know, you can always vote in secret and then maintain your radical image around your friends. Isn't being involved in politics inherently not cool? Because politics is for people who care. People who believe in things, people who place their hope in fallible human beings, all of which is very not cool. I feel like so much internet politics, whether radical or centrist, is just posturing. It's showcasing that you're funnier and smarter than the normies, that you see through all the bullshit, the corrupt system, the electoral farce. But all you're doing about it is sitting here shitposting and demeaning the people who are actually trying to accomplish what little can be accomplished. And in effect, edgy leftists who complain about both sides and do nothing are no different from edgy centrists who complain.
Is this video about trying to convince people to vote blue, or Contra trying to convince herself that she's doing the right thing by voting blue, and that her action to commit to inaction is justified? Because none of this sounds very sincere at all. It's pretty clear that she's aware that Biden is a shitty right-wing candidate, that she has to convince everybody, including herself, that her choice is justified. It is in this way that this video feels more like harm reduction for Contra's public image than it does an argument for harm reduction in US political discourse. And as for this attitude of just go out and vote for the lesser of two evils and partake in activism on the side, to me, this type of response coming from Contra after hearing this diatribe sounds like pure deflection from completely legitimate criticism, considering she's embedding the same harm reduction grift that the Democrats have been running for decades. Again, this strategy has been tried, it doesn't work. You have absolutely no proof that you can pull the Democrats left without any political leverage or coercion. I, on the other hand, have a mountain of evidence, just looking back at the last 8 years alone, that this strategy has not, does not, cannot, and will not work.
It's either way, so we may as well smash. Well, you're right, I don't expect Trump to go quietly. But if there's a decisive Biden victory and it's not some kind of vote recount nightmare scenario, then I think the military will force Trump to leave.
Okay, so she's arguing here that the military will enforce the popular will of the people and the Electoral College if Biden wins comfortably and decisively. Keep this in mind for later, because this is an important point.
Don't get me wrong, Tabby-chan. Times are tough. The president is a fascist. I think this country is closer to some kind of violent uprising than it's ever been in my life. But if it comes to smashing, you're gonna want allies. And for a lot of people, Trump rejecting a decisive Biden victory, therefore rejecting democracy itself, that would legitimize smashing. So you should still want every Biden vote you can get.
Okay, so here's the issue with that. Liberals are responsible for virtually every fascist uprising that has ever taken place in history. And when it comes to our movement, they are some of the last people that we will be able to trust or want on our side, because historically, they're some of the first people to stab us in the back and make a pact with the devil if it means preserving their dying system. I do believe in tactical alliances and compromising when need be. But we're not talking about collaborating with the Kuomintang in feudal China to kick out the colonial occupiers. We're talking about voting for Hindenburg to stop Hitler. And look who they ended up appointing Supreme Chancellor anyways. On this next clip, Contra's arguments against revolution pretty much amounts to, but it's too hard. Let's roll.
But capitalism is the root of the problems with our world. The whole system is broken, and voting won't change that. We don't need a Democrat. We need to end capitalism. Tabitha, capitalism is an epical world economic order. When you say end capitalism, you're talking about a tectonic shift in global politics that is so much bigger than all of us that I don't really understand what course of action you're recommending.
Appeal to futility. The capitalists have been overthrown in the past, and unlike your side, we have centuries of political science and revolutionary theory under our belts. We know what it's going to take, and we understand the scale of this endeavor. However, the only situation in which billions of people aren't killed or displaced by the coming ecological catastrophe is one where we have a political economic mode that is designed to address the problem. Global neoliberalism is not capable of addressing or coping with the looming chaos underway, and the actions that we take today, no matter how light, will carry the weight of Mount Everest down the line, provided we are unrelenting and well-disciplined in our approach.
Ending. Like before capitalism, there was feudalism, and feudalism ended over hundreds of years of complex shifts in population and production, not because people just decided it was time to end feudalism.
Well, you're only half right. The truth is that the technological and productive forces needed to establish a socialist planned economy have existed since the 1970s. With modern computation and IT, it has never been easier to plan an economy. We just don't do it because of the culturally hegemonic stranglehold that has been shackled to the psyche of everybody in the first world that capitalism is the best and only viable way to organize society. And until the proletariat is able to unify itself and realize its collective class interest, we will remain on this train, accelerating towards a brick wall at 180 miles per hour, and past that brick wall, if we survive, is the edge of a cliff, dropping off into oblivion.
The vast majority of Americans are not communists. I think a lot of internet leftists have a vastly overinflated sense of how big and important they are. I fell prey to it myself. Like, I was so sure that Bernie was gonna win the primary. In part because when I looked at my timeline, I was seeing this unanimous ocean of support for Bernie and contempt for the mainstream Dems. But what I was seeing, and what we're all seeing on our feeds, is a finely curated and very unrepresentative sample of the population. You have
Okay, so first off, on this point that there aren't that many communists in America, Contra, the Bolshevik Party at its peak before the October Revolution, only had roughly 50,000 members. The population of Russia at the time was around 90 million. The DSA has double that membership at roughly 100,000 right now. And now granted, many of them are Bernie-crats. The point remains that with enough iron discipline, knowledge of theory and history, tactical acumen, and proper material conditions ripe for a revolt, you would be surprised how rapidly that a small minority of commies can transform society. And as for the rest of that, this once again sounds like Contra being a defeatist. The reason why Bernie lost in 2016 and 2020 was because of the general lack of workers' movements, trade unions, proletarian militias, mutual aid networks, and otherwise organs of workers' control backing him. Note the example of Bolivia once again, where the Socialist Party did win the election. The point being is that the power doesn't lie in the politicians themselves, but in the collective political will of the people behind them. See my video on the Bolivian elections for details. Long story short, the Bolivian example blows a massive hole in your appeal to defeatism because it's a shining example of what happens when people at the grassroots realize their collective class interest and are willing to fight for it and not just stay complicit in the system that's oppressing them.
grade soft conservatism. You have to pull your head out of the radical bubble. Back in 2012, I volunteered to work on the Obama campaign, and I enraged people's dogs by knocking on their doors and ruined their dinners with canvassing phone calls. And I really recommend that leftists try doing this for at least one election, even though it is the worst thing in the world and I hated it so much. You know, you do have to listen to a lot of, I don't want Barack Hussein Obama redistributing my wealth. Okay, Ronald, I'm pretty sure Obama's not sending his death panels after your landscaping business, but whatever. Talking to voters teaches you the hard realities of what your fellow Americans actually care about. And when I was canvassing, I did talk to some left-wing people, you know, I talked to union families, but I don't think I talked to a single communist.
Again, we don't need millions of highly educated revolutionary cadres. We acknowledge that for every chief there's 100 Indians, but the point still stands. It doesn't take a vanguard party of millions to overthrow the system. Thousands will do. And yes, politicians do say that they'll implement these policies that seem popular, but they only implement any meaningful reform when people are organized against the state itself.
Furry anarchist friends. But look, if what you want is socialism, or even just social democracy, then you have a lot of work ahead of you in terms of outreach. You have to engage people, educate, raise awareness. But you don't want to do that, because it requires that you stop owning the libs and start actually communicating with them. Libs. How very bourgeois. But revolution. Revolution to end capitalism. Okay, so you're saying that your plan is to do a communist revolution and overthrow the US government. That's very valid. That's super hecking valid. That's extremely valid. I mean, I guess I admire the ambition. Just a couple quick follow-up questions though. Are you counting on the US military and police taking the side of the communists, or is your plan to overpower them? Because unless you know something about the military that I don't think that much of the military is going to defect to join a communist revolution. So there will have to be a war. You know, revolution doesn't happen overnight. After the Russian Revolution, there is the Civil War from 1917 to 1923, so you are going to need to raise a Red Army. I mean, you can't have a communist revolution without a Red Army, right? So...
Okay, so a couple of points. Number 1, note the condescension. It should disgust you. And 2, if you're fighting the whole of the military, then you're doing it wrong. In fact, you should be trying to get the mid and high-ranking officers as well as sects of the army on your side. You need a solid portion of the military willing to commit to mutiny for any revolution to work. Thirdly, while American soldiers are fairly warm to the idea of going overseas and killing people who look different than they do, wearing different kinds of clothes, speaking a different kind of language, hailing from a different country, growing up in a different culture, listening to different music, and worshipping a different god than they do, those same soldiers probably won't be partial to the idea of turning their guns against their fellow countrymen, turning their guns against the very people that they are sworn to protect. I imagine a great deal of people in the army would take pause if or when ordered to massacre large crowds of protesters or revolting citizens. In such a situation, I imagine swaths of the army would very rapidly disband. I personally know many veterans in the army now that can attest to this, saying if the time ever came to enforce martial law on the home front, many of them would just walk and go home. And another point. People in the military aren't inherently reactionary. Many go into it because they hail from a working class background and are trying to cultivate a livelihood for themselves and some material security, since some of the perks that are included with the job include free college and education, to price inelastic services, mind you, that the average American pays rent for. Bernie Sanders, the most progressive, left-wing politician in the country, had massive support from the military. In fact, Senator Sanders had more popular support from the military than any other presidential candidate in the Democratic Party. So the idea that entire sects of the army wouldn't be prone to defecting and fighting for a left-wing populist revolutionary movement is utter nonsense. Oh, and one more thing. Hey guys, remember this clip?
Well, you're right, I don't expect Trump to go quietly. But if there's a decisive Biden victory and it's not some kind of vote recount nightmare scenario, then I think the military will force Trump to leave.
So let me get this straight. You believe the military would enforce the Electoral College and the popular vote when it comes to ousting a potential fastest coup, but on the other hand, that same military would ruthlessly put down a populist democratic people's movement at the same time? So which is it? Does the military support the democratic will of the people, or do they not? For fuck's sake, Contra, you're a philosophy major. This is such a juvenile lapse in logic. I'm seriously wondering how in the fuck you have sat down, wrote the script for this, had plenty of time to proofread it, film the video, go through the editing process, give it a final view before publishing it, and not have caught this massive, glaring, in-your-face contradiction.
You know, when the far right talks about violence and overthrowing the government, they actually mean it. And you know they mean it because they have literal militias, the 3%ers, the Boogaloo Boys. They're stockpiling weapons and training to use them. They have ex-military men in their ranks and connections to white supremacists within the police and the military.
Yes, the American left is impotent and has no teeth. You're not helping with the making of this video telling people that resistance is futile. And by the way, left-wing militias do exist. The Socialist Rifle Association is a thing. Just a heads up.
Well, at the moment, we have a president promising to double down on law and order, on military police suppression, a president who told a room full of cops not to be too gentle with the people they arrest.
Wait, so let me get this straight. Your answer is to vote Biden and Harris? Biden, who wrote the crime bill, wrote and engineered the Patriot Act, voted for the war in Iraq, voted for NAFTA, and has recently said in an interview that he himself plans on ramping up the police state and that we need to crack down on anarchists. And then Kamala Harris, the former Attorney General of California, who locked up people for truancy, locked thousands up for non-violent drug offenses, and when asked if she ever smoked weed in an interview, she laughed about it, tried to get an innocent man on death row killed, and kept people past their sentences so they could be used for slave labor in prison. Really? These are the preferable alternative? And fucking hell, you even seem to acknowledge this in the same breath.
Nice.
And let's be clear, both Biden and Kamala have an ugly record when it comes to crime and policing. For most of his career, Biden has called for more policing, which is the opposite of what we need right now. I'm right there with you, Tabby-chan, but the 2020 protests have shifted the discourse about policing and criminal justice, and Biden has responded by beginning to shift his position. This year's Democratic platform includes things like stricter use of force standards, banning chokeholds, restricting qualified immunity, creating a registry of police misconduct, limiting no-knock warrants, decriminalizing weed, investing in crime prevention.
None of these policies address the underlying issues with our criminal justice system or the way the police force functions in this country. Everything on this list either does nothing to address the heart of the problem, i.e. banning chokeholds, or just makes the problems worse, i.e. criminal justice reorienting towards crime prevention, meaning that you could get locked up if they think you're going to commit a crime. And the policies that they do have on their platform that would meaningfully help out the public, such as decriminalizing weed, they are clearly lying about to get your vote. The Democrats aren't going to decriminalize weed or end the war on drugs, and if you believe otherwise, I have some swampland in Florida to sell you.
Kennedy first took office in 1961. He didn't want to propose a civil rights bill because that would have been super unpopular with the Southern Democrats. But then 1963 happened, and there were protests and uprisings all over the South, and the March on Washington that summer, and Kennedy listened.
And finally, we arrive at the only well-presented argument in this entire video. Too bad it still amounts to, we can push him left, guys. Trust me, bro. At least now we don't have to just take your word for it and we actually have a historical anecdote. To this, I say it's true. The Democrats are more likely to cave to popular revolt than the Republicans. And while we're on the topic of concessions and reform, if we're making that much noise to the point to where they're willing to grant us concessions, why stop with crumbs? Why not try to take the whole loaf of bread? It belongs to the people anyways. So in other words, why not fight for revolution, so we're not constantly in a situation like this year after year in the first place? But again, the reason why we got the Civil Rights Act wasn't because the politicians in power were willing to simply give it to us. It was because of people organizing outside of the context of bourgeois politics against the state on their own terms. Concessions by the ruling class have always been cynically weaponized to get people to stop resisting and co-opting the movement and reining it into the control of the bourgeois state. And take a look at what happened after the Civil Rights Act Contra. Nixon came along, followed by Reagan and Clinton, whom over the course of their combined administrations dismantled trade unions, outsourced our manufacturing jobs, and instituted the war on drugs and tough on crime legislation of the 80s and 90s, which directly, negatively impacts minorities and poor communities to this day. And the point stands that no matter how much we may try to work within the system and fight for concessions and reform from within, the forces of reaction are perpetually, without relents, working to roll the clocks back on those concessions, if not implementing reforms of their own to undermine the gains made prior for the working class. Because at the end of the day, capitalism is a zero-sum game. And the one thing on your list that would do anything to alleviate the oppression of minorities, that is, decriminalizing marijuana, is not going to happen under Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Not after these two goons have literally spent their entire political careers enforcing the war on drugs and expanding the police states. From here on out, she continues to repeat the batshit notion that you can vote out fascism, and reaffirm the argument that voting is super easy, and thus we have an obligation to vote for one demented pedophile over another. Now it's time for some closing thoughts. The consequences of a Biden administration will be just as damning to our cause as the consequences of a Trump administration, since his election will be the catalyst for the media to spin the narrative that the battle is over, the war is won, we beat Orange Man. Now it's time for America to go back to bed, and the beefed up police state under Biden and Harris will come along and clean up the remaining crowds of protesters and rioters, and reinforce business as usual. Many of the reactionary policies and crimes against humanity committed under Barack Obama were swept under the rug and completely ignored by the liberal media, and the only reasons these policies, from the migrant detention centers to the fracking, to the right-wing healthcare proposal Obamacare, to the ramping up of the drone strikes, the signing off of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, to the fact that Obama was the harshest president ever on marijuana, etc., weren't ever talked about was because it was politically convenient at the time for the media to ignore it. Trump did little more than unmask this disgusting political machine and expose it for what it is. And the liberal establishment doesn't like that, which is why they want to get him out and get a proper puppet in so that they can get everyone to go back to sleep. Every time progressives have attempted to infiltrate and change the Democratic Party from within, they have irrevocably been co-opted and reined into their hegemony, and mired within the narrow confines of what the DNC considers the appropriate range of discourse of what can and cannot be done. Every year it's the same. We can push them left and do harm reduction, but if you can't even leverage your vote because otherwise you risk granting the more reactionary party a chance of victory, the consequence of this means that you can't ever genuinely pressure them. You genuinely can't ever leverage anything against them, so they have no incentive to listen to you because they know that they are always secure because they'll always have your vote no matter what. And as a side note, the Democrats aren't interested in beating the Republicans anyways. They'll gladly eat the loss over and over again because whether they win or lose, they are still going to be on the payroll of the capitalist oligarchy that runs the country. So if you can't ever leverage your vote, and even if you do try to leverage the vote and get them to accept reform, and even when they do go to implement reform, it's just a cynical means to trick everybody into supporting their party, then the logical conclusion is that the only winning move is not to play on their terms. And this is why I advocate for a third party, more specifically a workers' vanguard party that adheres to the principles of democratic centralism, collective decision-making, egalitarianism, militant leftism, and mass line tactics. We need to sow the seeds for dual power and organize a political machine capable of fighting for our collective class interest. And this constant genuflecting to the Democrats as though they are genuinely left-wing, to think that we can infiltrate it or change it from within, and that we always have to fall in line or else, these are the politics of a defeatist, the politics of a tailist. And there is no room for tailism or defeatism in our movements. And I'm not even saying that we shouldn't participate in bourgeois elections, but we've been trying this shit for decades and it hasn't worked. It's gotten us nowhere, and it's got to stop. And these motherfuckers need to be seen as the grifters that they are. Ever wonder why they're all telling you to support the Democrats ineringly and uncritically with reckless abandon? It's because being a center-left liberal shill pays. These people make tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per year doing what they do. It is not in their interest to fight the system because they are its benefactors. In other words, they are your class enemy, and the sooner people can see these chameleons for the hacks that they are, the better. So in summary, reject Breadtube, embrace BeardTube. Read theory, join a book club, learn some useful skills, join a socialist organization, educate, agitate, and organize. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to support me in any material way, please comment, like, subscribe, and share on your social media, and consider donating to my Patreon. That's all I have to say for now. Red salute, comrades.